Hey guys, this is Algebra for Faith, and this is the lesson for April. I've already forgotten. I didn't write it up there. April 27th, Monday, April 27th. It starts on page 409 in your book. It's going over factoring trinomials of a particular form. I can show you the form. So it's factoring trinomials that look like this. X squared plus bx plus c. We're factoring those trinomials. Before we get into that though, let's just practice doing the FOIL method, which you had in chapter 9. And what we're actually doing today, after we get to it a little bit, is we're taking the FOIL method and we're doing it backwards. So yesterday you factored out a common monomial. Today we're having to use our thinking brains just a little bit in order to get a trinomial that looks like that into two binomials that look like this. So what we're going to do first of all is just multiply using the FOIL method, seeing what we get, and then we're going to we're going to factor those trinomials. Blech. I'll get it out of my head here in a minute. So this is April 27th, so you have received, my thing is over here. You have received from me on April 27th, I think I sent home 3 quizzes because actually what's happening is you all are almost to the point where you're ready for a test coming to you next week. So I sent home 3 quizzes this week. So we're doing 10.2 today. You have a quiz on 10.1, 10.2. You'll have a quiz on 10.3 and 10.4. And you'll also have a quiz on 10.5. And then if you notice, that chapter is complete. That's this whole chapter was on factoring. So that chapter is completed. You will not receive the test until the following Monday, which will be May, what is that, the 4th? May the 4th. So, we just talk like Yoda Day, or Star Wars Day, whatever you want to say. So, let's start out with this one. Just use FOIL method. Remember, FOIL method, we used this in the previous chapter, chapter 9, for multiplying binomials. So this means first, outer, inner, last, just to be able to get that together. When I multiply my first terms, that's going to become an x squared. I'm going to multiply my outer terms, and that becomes a 2x. I'll multiply the inner terms. That will become just an x. Multiply the last terms, and that will become I pointed to the outer and inner. So we'll multiply the last terms, and that will become a plus 2. What happens to these two right here in the middle? Those two are like terms, so they actually go together, and that becomes a plus 3x, and that's my final. So just notice how these are going together. That'll be important when we're taking them apart, going backwards this way. So let's multiply these. First term will become an x squared. The outer terms becomes a 3x. The inner term will become a negative 7x. And the last term will become a negative 21. These two are added together. I add them together, right? My signs aren't the same, so I'm going to take the sign of the larger absolute value number, and what is that going to be? That inner term is going to become a negative 4x when I added those together. Going to number 3, let me make sure you can see. So going to number 3, first term will become x squared. The outer terms becomes a negative 6x. The inner terms will be a plus 4x. The last terms will be a negative 24. I combine my like terms in the middle, I add them together. Signs are not the same, so I'm going to take the sign of the larger absolute value number. So if I subtract that, that's going to become, I'm kind of over here in the middle, a negative 2x. Remember this? Remember doing this a little bit? Multiply the first term, x squared. Outer terms, negative 3x. inner term will become a negative 5x. And the last term, multiplying that together, that will become a positive 15. I have to add these two together. I'm going to add them together. Signs are the same. That will become a negative 8x. Then, down here, let's go ahead and multiply my last one. The only thing that's different with all of these is that the first term here actually has a coefficient with it, a numerical coefficient, if we want to get technical with it. So if I multiply the 2x to the 3x, that becomes a 6x squared. Multiply my outer terms, right? Outer terms, that becomes a negative 2x. Multiply the inner terms, that would become a positive 12x. Multiply the last terms, and that becomes a negative 4, right? So we have a negative 4. I'm just trying to make sure I'm doing everything together. Oops, you cannot see anything, can you? We're going to put together the two like terms. It's right here in the middle. That if I add them together, my signs are not the same. So I'm going to subtract, take the sign of the larger absolute value number, and that will end up becoming a positive 10x here in the middle. So I will tell you why we are doing all these and why I wanted you to kind of look through it. You can look right now on page 409. So what it's telling you is it's showing you the full method. And if you notice what's happening is basically my outer and inner terms, I multiplied those together. Then what did I do with them? They were like terms, so I added them together. So think about it. So I multiplied my outer term, I multiplied my inner terms, and then I added those together. Well, that's what factoring something that looks like this ends up doing. You are basically trying to think, when I'm trying to figure out this term, I'm looking for factors of this term that when I added them together, they would end up like that. I'm just going to grab, if you want to know, all right, where's she grabbing this? I'm actually going all the way back to my lesson opener that I just did, and I'm grabbing that first thing we ended up doing. Which means technically, guys, I'm going to show, you've already got the answer, but I just wanted to look at what what we're trying to do. So I want factors of that term that when I add them together, I end up with 3x in the middle. And not just any 3x, it has to be a positive 3x. So let's think about it. What are factors of 2? This should be super easy because 2 is a prime number, so there's really only 2 factors that I'm going to use. What ended up happening? I'll need factors of a 2 that if I added the 2 factors together, that would become a 3. So the only 2 factors of 2 I've got is 2 and 1. And if I add those together, I get a 3. But to show my factoring in here, I would need to make 1 and a 2. Actually, it doesn't matter what order, but the reason why I wanted to show you that is because look what our first lesson opener was. Our first lesson opener was that exact binomial. And when we multiplied them together, we got that. To factor it, we took it backwards. We looked in the middle, and then we looked at this last term, and we said, what are 2 factors that if I added those together, they would end up there? Now, are you going to get some that don't factor? Yeah, just like we did yesterday. They don't factor. What do we call those things? Prime. You have some of those in your homework. Going to tell you on your test, on your quiz for this section, for 10.1 and 10.2, none are prime. You're going to have to factor them. On your entire test, only one of those trinomials is prime. So don't, the majority of the time, if you're thinking, oh, this baby's prime, on your test or quiz, no. On your quiz, nada. On your test, only one. Only one comes out prime. So you just need to kind of hit the dirt and try to figure it out. So let's go on page 409 down to this little table because it's basically telling you how to factor a trinomial. I'm going to grab one that we've had that we just did previously rather than going through all of these. And this is where we have to start thinking about, okay, what's my signs got to be? So let's think about what we're doing. Write the factors of the first term. I'm reading this little table on page 409 for factoring trinomials with this form. Write the factors of the first term. Find the factors of the constant term, C, whose sum is going to end up being B. And then check the results by multiplying the binomials. And we do have to consider what exactly the middle terms are going to end up becoming. So let's write the factors of the first term. That's easy breezy. That would be x, right? Then what I'm trying to figure out, all right, what are my factors of this that if I added them together, I would end up with a -2 in the middle. And this is a little bit different from the prime factoring that we did yesterday. It's almost like you're taking the number 24 and you're trying to come up with all the different factors. And of course, one of them would be like, okay, 1 and 24. And then you could say, okay, it could be a 2 and it could be a 12, right? Or you could go on down. It could also be what? It could also be a, isn't there more? Oh yeah, a 3 and a 4. So you've got all of these different factors. Oh, I missed something. Not 2. Yeah, 2 and 12. We did a 2 and a 12. And then I've got, seems like I'm missing, oh, that's it. 3 and 8. 3 and 8, brother. I started thinking we were factoring 12. And then we've got that. All of these are factors of 24. So 1 times 24 would be 24. 2 times 12 would be 24. 3 times 8 would be 24. 4 times 6 would be 24. Now, talk about adding those together and seeing if I could get a -2. What could I add together in order to get a -2? Yes, the answer is over here. We just did it, but I just want to show you how I'm trying to figure it out. And you could just start saying, all right, I could either add these together or I subtract these, and I would end up with a 2. And there's a couple that would work. I could add or subtract 3, I could get an 11, or I could get, if I subtracted it, I could end up with a 5. That's not going to work. These two are not going to work. You could then start to say, all right, so maybe I could do it with a 2 and a 12. That potentially would work, right? Potentially, I could say, all right, I could add it together and I would end up with like a 10, and maybe I could have that. Maybe that would work. But then if I look at what my, that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work either. So we're going to mark that out. What wouldn't work is the 4 and the 6. The 4 and the 6. So if I want the 4 and the 6 to be negative, and I want just a -2 in the middle, then you've got to kind of think, and we've got another table that's helping us. If I want that last one to be negative, then that's telling me if I'm multiplying these two together, my signs have to be different. This is also telling me, all right, if I want to add these two together and end up with a -2, then that's telling me my absolute value highest number needs to be negative. So that would be the 6 is going to have to be negative, and the 4 is going to have to be positive. And if you notice, that's what we did over here in our homework. Or not our homework, what's it called? A lesson opener. Is that when we foiled this baby, that's what we ended up with. We ended up with this thing. Now, flip over and let's look at your next table. that's at the very top of page 410. And they're giving you this short little easy breezy collection of what to do with my sign numbers. So, and there is a question on your quiz that you're going to freak out and think this is a word problem when all it's really asking you to do is to think out this table that's on page 410. You have to think about what my signs would need to be in the binomial in order to get an example for the trinomial. So if the signs of C is positive, then the signs are the same. The factors will have to have the sign of the trinomial's middle term. And we can kind of look like this. So we can look at all the ones we just did. So if this was positive, that's telling me my signs have to be the same, right? We also had one that looked like this. This was positive, but my signs were the same, but they were both negative, okay? That's what ends up happening. So if the sign of C is positive, the signs are the same. The factors will have the same sign of the trinomial's middle term. And we can look at this. Signs the same. This one was positive. Signs have to be the same, so it takes the middle term. That tells me, ooh, my terms are positive. Look at the ones where they're both negative. So my sign is C is positive, and my signs in my binomial have to be the same as that middle term, and that's what we have right here. I know I'm off camera, but you can hear my voice, so hopefully you've got that. That's all that 410 is telling you. So look at what the next section is. What if C ends up being negative? Then it tells you if C is negative, the signs in my binomial have to be different. And we will look at it here in a second. The signs are different. The larger factor is going to have the sign of the trinomial's middle term. So let's look at this. So C is negative, like we're at 21. So C is negative. The next step told me the signs have to be different. And they are. And then it tells me the largest factor will have to have the sign of the trinomial's middle term. And you can see this. The larger factor was negative, so look, the larger factor ended up having, it was negative. It was that -7. What did we have another one that looked like? Same thing down here, just so we got. So C is a -24. I'll look right here in the middle. The sign that C is, right, the larger factor will have the sign of the trinomial's middle term. And look, the larger factor, 6, had the sign of the trinomial's middle term. So this is basically doing FOIL backwards and forwards. Text. And so what I want to do next is let's take so put by both of those tables, you need to know it for your quiz to help you out. Your next example looks like is example 5. Example 5 looks like number 5 that we had on our lesson opener. So I'm going to take that over here and we're going to figure out how to do that. But if you want to know how to do it, it's basically example 5 is what we're doing. So I am going to write this out. 6x squared plus 10x minus 4, right? That's what we've got. That's what that's what our lesson opener started with. Do we already know the binomial? Yeah, we do, because we FOILed it in order to get this, but we're taking this thing backwards. So let's look at example 5. The first step in factoring a polynomial is to factor out any common monomials, which is what we did yesterday. So if I go through here, there is a common monomial there screaming out my name. So I have a 6 2. I have a 6. I have a 10. I have a 4. What is a common monomial? What is a number that I could divide into both of those? Well, they're all even numbers, so ding, 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 right? That common monomial would be a 2. So that's what I need to just go ahead and take out. Let's go ahead and go all the way through here, and let's take out the 2, and that's what they're doing here. So I need to go ahead and, take out the 2 first, right? Take out the 2. So I'm going to take out the 2. This is going to become what? 2 divided by 6 is going to be 3x squared. 10 divided by 2 will become 5x. And then finally, the negative 4 divided by 2 will become a negative 2. So let's make sure we got it down that far, right? So we've moved it down all the way. That one ended up coming a booger one, almost like one we're going to do tomorrow, because the one you got in your book looks a whole lot easier. Well, stink. All right, so this one we're going to have to, that one's not going to work. Let's go back to our example. This one is actually one you're going to do tomorrow. So I don't want to get you confused on any of the ones we're doing right now. So sorry, bad example. Let's just use what your examples got on example 5. Because that one's going to be a lot easier, and I don't want to get you started in tomorrow's lesson today. So I'm going to take the 2 out of this one. And when I take the 2 out of it, I am left with a squared. Now I've got the same setup. There's nothing right here. That's going to end up becoming 32a. And then this one's going to come up as a negative 144. Then, after I get out the common monomial, and after this one's all by itself, because that's all you're dealing with 10.1 and 10.2, is I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to figure out my first 2 factors. And my first 2 factors are just going to be a. It'll just be a. Then, I'm going to consider factors of a negative 144 and try to figure out what would those factors be of 144 that when I added or subtracted them, I would end up with a negative 32. And so they go through all these different factors. You would have to do the same thing that you would do with your factoring, trying to figure out the different factors of that. They started with 1 and 144, but when I subtracted, ended up with a 143. They started with a 2 and a negative 72, because that's telling me, all right, this one's negative. That's telling, I'm going to have the larger factor is going to have to be negative, right? That's what I got from my rules on this previous page. So I'm going to have to, I know one's going to be plus, one's going to be negative, because that's negative. My largest factor is going to be the sign of that. I go through 3 and 48. If I subtract that, I end up with a 45. My final one is 4 times 36. And ding, 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 that's what I need. I need 4. My largest factor has to be 36. And that would end up being 32 in the middle if I put those together. See, this is going backwards. Going backwards. Taking FOIL and then thinking through and going backwards. We are going to do a few of your homework problems. If I was here and we were assigning problems, and you have plenty more examples, okay? So that was example 5. You don't even know what we just did. But if we were all here together, I'd probably say do 2 through 28 even. Now I'll say do 1 through 28 odd, so you can just check yourself. This isn't stuff you've done before, guys. What I noticed on your previous test is a lot of you guys did really, really well on your quizzes, and it's like you choked on your test, and I'm not certain why. But what that indicates to me is that you don't know what you're doing, even if you got the book in front of you. So it's because I'm talking about people who normally do pretty well on stuff. That indicates to me you've not done enough practice to know what the procedure is. So you may want to do a few more problems. Yes, I'm doing some, but you might want to stop right then, stop right after this, take a few more problems and work it through and see if you can get the correct answer in order to go move on to your quiz. Because typically, because I had a few kids turn in their homework, those kids were doing better on their test than the kids who typically did really, really well in algebra thus far, but they really bombed on their test. So just warning you guys, this is making you free and independent. Some of you are watching videos, some of you aren't watching videos. It shows, okay? It showed on that last test because I had to give everybody a royal boost. Some of you royal boosted really well. Some of you royally boosted up to barely passing. So let's try 1. 1 is just a basic one. We've already done one that's super similar to it. It is a squared plus 8a and then negative 15. And then look at what we can already just spy and figure out what we're doing. First of all, that's negative. If I go to my table on 410, if that sign of C is negative, I know my signs in my binomial have to be different. They have to be different. So I know that when I put this together, one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. And then what it tells me is whatever sign, the larger factor of 15, is going to have to be the sign that I have here. I'm putting that together, right? So actually, I just did that wrong because number 1, it is 15. So that's telling me C is positive, so it has to be. They both have to be that. Totally looked at number 1 wrong. So I put down my factors for my first sign, which would be for my first term, which would be x. That's going to be a. Then I'm thinking of factors that would add up to be 8. That's probably just, really easy because 15 only has 4 different factors, 1 and 15, and then it has 3 and 5. And guess what that adds up to be in the middle? Easy, right? Now I want you to look at 11. So 11 is where we have x squared, and then 9x, and here in the middle is going to be a positive 20. So once again, this is positive, and that's telling me that my signs have to be the same. How do I get the sign that's the same? The factors will have the sign of this trinomial. So of this middle term of the trinomial. So even though this one's positive, that means my signs are the same, but my sign is going to be the sign of b. So both of those are going to be negative. I put in my factors for the first term, it's x. Then I start looking at 20 and trying to figure out, all right, what are some factors that when I add them up together would be 9? And factors of 20, 2 and 10, right? That would be 1 and 20, or 4 and 5. That's what you need. Those two will add up and be 9. Or subtract and end up being 9. So let me look at one more that we were going to do. I'm just going to tell you, everything from 1 really through 22 are very similar to what's on your quiz. You do have a few of those that are prime. That's not going to be on your quiz. Yeah, a prime one's not. 23, 24, and 25 is where they want you to rewrite the terms. They're wanting you to get used to these terms are not in descending order. Before I can factor them, I have to rewrite them. And what that means is that I have to have my square term first, then my next one that's got my next coefficient, and then my constant comes last. They're getting you used to writing that in order. I'm looking at 26, 27, and 28 because that's where you have to begin factoring by factoring out a common binomial. Since you already have 27, I'm going to let you have 27 to practice on. Let's do 28. I don't know if that's necessarily the hardest one. But since that's your last one, let's look at 28. And we have ax squared. Actually, this one's like super easy breezy, but oh well. It's just we're using a literal coefficient. Shoot, it's all screensaver was going back. So, literal coefficient. What's common between both of these? Literal coefficient I'm talking about, of course, is A. It's the letter. It's the common. That is common all the way through it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out A from all of that. And what am I going to have left? Are these in the middle? Just to see, that's just one that might be tricky for you, kind of tricky. So now, I've got A out. A is going to stay out here. Then I'm going to start factoring mine in the middle. My first term that I'm going to factor out would be X. Then I look here. Okay, it's negative. That's telling me this is negative, my signs are not the same. My signs cannot be the same. This is telling me that I need 11, so that's telling me my factor that is the largest has to be negative. So my largest factor will be here. Well, what are two factors of 12 that if I put them together, I'd end up with a negative 11? Right off the bat, you all might start going 6 and 2. Could it be 3 and 4? That would work, but then if you started fiddling with it, you'd say, no, that's not going to work. It's actually the least positive, it's the one that you wouldn't think it would be, and it would be 12 and 1. That's what you need right there is 12 and 1. So that's done a few of your problems that we've done so far. I think I forgot to pray at the beginning of our lesson. Once again, if you have any questions about this problem or when you get your quiz, if you have any questions about your quiz, if you want me to just get you started or to talk you through one, I don't mind. The best way to contact me would be through a text, so I can, that would get the quickest response. So let's pray, and then you are good for your session on 10.2. So Heavenly Father, thank you for everything you have provided for us, and I just pray that you will clear our minds from distractions so that we can concentrate on algebra and we can learn these last few lessons that are going to be so integral to Algebra 2 or geometry or whatever's coming up, because all of this is involved for next year. And Father, we just pray for our world. We pray for all the chaos that's going on. And we just pray that you'll help us to remember that no matter what's happening here, you have us in the palm of your mighty hand. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys, so see you tomorrow with 10.3, and have a great rest of the day.